The battle was over, but the dying had not stopped. Commander Cole stood at the viewport of the human frigate Defiant and watched the debris field spin slowly in the darkness of space. Broken ships tumbled end over end, their hulls torn open like wounded animals. Some still burned with pale fire. Others were completely dark, their crews already dead or dying in the cold vacuum. The humans had won this fight, but did not feel like celebrating. "Sir, we should leave," said Lieutenant, his second in command. She was young and tired, and her uniform was stained with smoke from the fires they had fought during the battle. "They might send reinforcements. We're in no shape for another fight." Knew she was right. The Defiant had taken heavy damage. Half their weapons were offline. The medical bay was full of wounded sailors. They needed to run, not linger in enemy space. But something on his scanner was bothering him. "There," he said, pointing at a faint signal coming from a destroyed cruiser. "Life signs. One person barely alive." Looked at him like he had gone mad. "Sir, that's an enemy ship. If someone survived over there, they're the enemy." "They're a person," said quietly. The room went silent. Everyone on the bridge was staring at him now. He could feel their confusion and their anger. They had been killing humans for 3 years. They showed no mercy to human prisoners. They called humans insects and vermin. They believed humans were too primitive to deserve a place among the stars. And now their commander wanted to rescue one of them. "I'm taking a shuttle," said. "You have the bridge. If the show up jump to safety, don't wait for me." "Commander, this is crazy," said. "You could die over there for what? For an enemy." Was already walking toward the door. "For a person who needs help. That's what we're supposed to be, Lieutenant, the good guys." The shuttle ride to the wrecked cruiser took only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. Piloted alone, weaving through floating debris and bodies. He tried not to look at the dead too closely. Some were human. In death, they all looked the same. The cruiser was called the Starlight Throne, according to the markings on its hull. It had been a beautiful ship once, all graceful curves and silver metal. Now it was a corpse, its back broken by human missiles. Found an airlock that still worked and forced his way inside. The emergency lights were failing, flickering red, and then going dark. He turned on his helmet light and moved deeper into the ship. The halls were full of destruction. Ceiling panels had fallen. Wires hung like dead snakes. The air was thin and getting thinner. His suit told him he had maybe 2 hours of oxygen left. He followed his scanner toward the life sign. It led him to what looked like a private cabin, much nicer than the rest of the ship. The door was jammed, so used a cutting tool to burn through it. Inside he found her. She was young, maybe 15 or 16 in human years. Her skin was the color of polished silver, and her hair was long and white as snow. She was pinned under a heavy beam that had fallen from the ceiling, and there was blood everywhere. But it was her eyes that made Stop breathing. They were violet, bright purple like flowers from Earth. He had studied culture before the war. He knew what those eyes meant. Violet eyes were the mark of royalty. This girl was someone important, maybe very important. Her eyes opened and she looked up at him with pure terror. She tried to speak, but her voice was too weak. Did not need to understand her words to know what she was thinking. She expected him to kill her. That was what soldiers did to helpless enemies. "It's okay," said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you, I'm here to help." She did not understand his words, but maybe she understood his tone. She stopped struggling and just watched him with those strange, beautiful eyes. Got to work. The beam was heavy, too heavy for him to lift alone. He used his cutting tool to slice it into smaller pieces, working carefully so he would not hurt her more. It took a long time. His oxygen was running low. Sweat dripped into his eyes. Finally, he freed her. She cried out in pain when he moved her, and more blood flowed from her wounds. Pressed his emergency medical patches against the worst of the damage, and prayed they would work on alien biology. "Can you breathe?" he asked. "Is your suit damaged?" She pointed weakly at her helmet. There was a crack in the faceplate. Her oxygen was leaking out. Did not hesitate. He disconnected his own oxygen supply and connected it to her suit. The alarm in his helmet started screaming at him, warning him that he was now breathing the thin, poisoned air of the dying ship. He picked her up in his arms and ran. The journey back to his shuttle was a nightmare. His lungs burned. His vision was going dark at the edges. The girl was heavy in his arms, but he refused to put her down. He crashed through debris and stumbled over bodies and somehow made it to the airlock. He threw the girl into the shuttle, fell in after her, and slammed the door shut. Fresh oxygen flooded the small cabin, and lay on the floor gasping like a fish, while his body remembered how to breathe. The girl was unconscious now, but still alive. He could see her chest rising and falling. "You're going to be okay," he told her, even though she could not hear him. "I promise." The flight back to the Defiant was quick. His crew was waiting for him, and their faces were not friendly. They helped carry the girl to the medical bay, but they did it with anger in their eyes. Doctor met them at the door. She was an older woman with gray hair and steady hands, and she had seen too much death in this war. But when she looked at the wounded girl, something soft appeared in her face. "She's just a child," said quietly. "Can you save her?" asked. "I'll try." Watched through the window as the doctor worked. His crew gathered behind him, full of questions and complaints. He ignored them all. Just before the girl went into surgery, her eyes fluttered open one last time. She looked directly at and whispered a single word. "Orit." Doctor froze. Her face went pale. "Commander," she said slowly, "that's a royal title. It means princess." She looked down at the girl with something like fear. "We just rescued a princess of the Dominion. The enemy is going to want her back." Watched the surgery room doors close behind his patient. He thought about what he had done and what it might cost. He found that he did not regret it at all. 3 weeks passed, and the princess did not die. Doctor called it a miracle. The girl's wounds had been terrible, and human medicine was not designed for alien bodies. But somehow, with careful work and a little luck, the doctor had saved her life. Her name was Princess, third daughter of the supreme matriarch of the Dominion. She was, according to the intelligence reports, one of the most important people in the entire enemy empire. She was also, discovered, very lonely and very scared. The Defiant had retreated to neutral space after the rescue. They were waiting for orders from the human admiralty, who were waiting for them to make contact about their princess. Everyone expected a ransom demand or a prisoner exchange. This girl was worth 100 captured soldiers, maybe more. But they said nothing. Days passed, then weeks. No messages, no threats, no demands. It was as if Princess had never existed at all. Did not understand. How could they abandon their own princess? He started visiting her quarters every day. At first, she was afraid of him. She would press herself against the far wall and watch him with those violet eyes, waiting for the torture to begin. The translator device they gave her was slow and clumsy, and her words came out strange and broken. "Why you come?" she asked him on the third day. "What you want from me?" Sat down on the floor, making himself smaller and less threatening. "I just wanted to see how you're doing. Are you eating? Do you need anything?" She stared at him like he was speaking nonsense. "You want nothing, no questions, no pain." "No pain," said firmly. "You're not a prisoner, you're a guest who can't leave yet but still a guest." She did not believe him. He could see it in her eyes, but she stopped pressing herself against the wall. Over the following days brought her things. Books from the ship's library, translated into her language by the computer. Music from Earth, everything from classical to rock to jazz. Food from the galley, including something the cook called hot chocolate, which was warm and sweet and made from plants that grew on humanity's home world. was suspicious of everything at first. She sniffed the hot chocolate like it might be poison. She held the books like they might explode. But slowly, carefully, she began to trust. "This drink," she said one evening, holding her cup with both hands. "It is good, warm, like being safe." Smiled, "It's my favorite. My mother used to make it for me when I was young, back on Earth." "Your mother," repeated, "she is alive." "No, she died a long time ago. She got sick and we didn't have money for medicine." Looked out the window at the stars. "That's why I joined the military. Steady pay. A chance to help people. She would have liked that, I think." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My mother is supreme matriarch. She rules all. She is very powerful, very strong. She never makes warm drinks. She never sits with me like this." "That sounds lonely," said. "I did not know it was lonely," admitted, "until now." They talked for hours that night, told him about her home world, about the great crystal cities and the purple oceans and the 3 moons that filled the night sky. She told him about her studies, her sisters, her dreams of one day exploring the galaxy. She told him about the war and how she had been taught that humans were monsters, barely more than animals. "But you are not monster," she said, looking at him with wonder. "You are kind. Why are you kind?" Thought about the question. Because someone has to be. Because the universe is dark and cold and the only thing that makes it bearable is how we treat each other. You're a kid who got caught in a war you didn't start. That's not something I punish. His eyes filled with tears. It was the first time he had seen her cry. The next morning, Lieutenant came to with terrible news. "Intelligence finally figured out why they aren't responding," she said. Her face was grim. "The princess has been officially disavowed. The Supreme Matriarch made a public announcement. She said died in the battle and that anyone claiming otherwise is spreading lies." Felt cold. She abandoned her own daughter. Worse than that, she erased her. According to the government, Princess doesn't exist anymore. Never existed. If we try to return her, they'll probably execute her for being an imposter. Found in the observation deck an hour later. She was sitting alone in the dark, staring at the stars with empty eyes. She had heard the news somehow. Maybe from a crew member, maybe from an intercepted broadcast. It didn't matter. Her mother had thrown her away. Sat down beside her. He didn't say anything. Sometimes words weren't enough. Sometimes all you could do was be there. "She never loved me," whispered. I thought she was just cold because she had to be, because she was the matriarch, but she never loved me at all." "I'm sorry," said. "I'm so sorry. What will happen to me now? Where will I go?" Looked at this girl, this child who had lost everything. Her world, her family, her identity. She had nothing left except a room on an enemy ship and a human commander who brought her hot chocolate. "You'll stay with us," he said, "for as long as you need. This ship isn't much, but it's safe, and you have friends here now, whether you know it or not." Friends looked at him with confusion. "You are my friend. If you want me to be." She started crying again, but this time there was something else in her tears, something that might have been hope. They sat together in silence, watching the stars turn slowly outside the window. The universe was vast and dark and full of cruelty. But in this small moment on this small ship, there was warmth. Then the alarm started screaming. "Commander to the bridge." His voice came over the speakers, tight with fear. "We have a ship off our bow. It's huge, sir. Bigger than anything I've ever seen." Ran, followed him, her face pale with terror. When they reached the bridge, everyone was staring at the ship hung in space like a silver mountain, beautiful and deadly. It was not attacking. It was just waiting. "They're hailing us," said. On screen. The image that appeared made gasp and fall to her knees. It was a female, tall and terrible and beautiful. Her skin was silver, her eyes were violet, and her face could have been carved from ice. She wore the crown of the Dominion, and her presence filled the bridge like a physical force. I am Supreme Matriarch, she said, her voice cold as space itself. I have come for the human who stole my daughter. Was shaking on the floor, unable to speak or move. Stepped forward and faced the most powerful being in the enemy empire. She's not stolen, he said. She's safe, and she's not going anywhere unless she wants to. The matriarch's eyes narrowed. Something dangerous flickered in their violet depths. We shall see, human, we shall see. The meeting took place on a neutral space station, far from both human and territory. It was the only way either side would agree to talk. Walked through the station's corridors with his heart pounding in his chest. Behind him came, flanked by 2 human guards. The girl had not spoken since seeing her mother's face on the. She moved like a ghost, her eyes empty and distant. The conference room was large and cold. Half was decorated in human style, with simple furniture and soft lighting. The other half was, all sharp angles and silver metal and crystals that glowed with inner fire. The Supreme Matriarch was already there. Had thought he was ready. He had seen pictures of. He had read reports about her power and her cruelty. He had prepared himself to meet a monster. But nothing could have prepared him for the reality. She was over 8 feet tall, towering above every human in the room. Her silver skin seemed to glow from within, and her violet eyes burned with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. She was ancient, new, over 200 years old. She had ruled the Dominion for longer than most human nations had existed. And she was looking at him like he was an insect that had wandered into her palace. So, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, this is the human who claims to have saved my daughter. I didn't claim anything, said, keeping his voice steady. I did save her. She was dying in the wreckage of your ship and I pulled her out. And why would you do such a thing? What did you hope to gain? Nothing. She needed help. I helped. The matriarch's eyes narrowed. Humans do not do things for nothing. You are creatures of greed and violence. I have studied your species. I know what you are. With respect, said, you don't know anything about us. The room went very quiet. The delegation looked shocked. No one spoke to the Supreme Matriarch like that. No one. But did not kill him. Instead, something strange flickered across her face. Something that might have been curiosity. Bring my daughter forward, she commanded. Stepped out from behind the guards. She was shaking, but she held her head high, felt a surge of pride at her courage. Mother and daughter faced each other across the room. The silence stretched on and on. Then the matriarch did something that made everyone gasp. She fell to her knees. It was not a graceful movement. It was raw and desperate, the motion of a mother who has been separated from her child for too long. Opened her arms, and her face crumbled with an emotion that had never expected to see on that cold, perfect mask. She whispered, "My little star, my heart." Stood frozen for a moment. Then she ran into her mother's arms. They held each other and wept, and the most powerful being in the Dominion sobbed like a broken child. The delegation looked away, embarrassed. Such displays of emotion were forbidden in their culture. Weakness was not permitted. But did not seem to care. I thought I lost you, she said into her daughter's hair. When I heard your ship was destroyed, I thought I lost you forever. You told everyone I was dead, said, her voice muffled. You erased me. I had to, pulled back and took her daughter's face in her hands. You don't understand. When I learned you survived and that a human had saved you, everything became dangerous. Our enemies at court would have used this against us. They would have said you were weak, that I was weak. They would have killed us both. So you pretended I didn't exist. I pretended while I worked in shadow. I removed our enemies one by one. I made it safe for you to return, and then I came myself because I would not trust anyone else with your life. She pressed her forehead against. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I should have come sooner. Watched this reunion with a strange feeling in his chest. He had been so ready to hate the matriarch. She had seemed like a villain, a cold tyrant who threw away her own child. But the truth was more complicated than that. Then stood and turned to face him. "Now," she said, and her voice was strong again though her eyes were still wet, "I must deal with you. Deal with me. You saved my daughter's life. In culture, this creates a debt that must be paid." She stepped closer to him and had to fight the urge to step back. "But you are human. You are the enemy. How do I know you are not a monster wearing a kind face? How do I know you did not save to use her as a weapon against me?" "I saved her because she was dying and I could help," said simply. "That's all." "Words are easy. I need to see the truth." The matriarch raised one silver hand. "I will perform the deep seeing. I will look into your mind and your memories and your soul, and I will know what you truly are." The delegation murmured in shock. There was an ancient ritual, usually used only for judging criminals. It was painful and invasive. It stripped away all lies and left the soul naked and exposed. "And if I refuse?" asked. "Then I will assume you have something to hide, and I will take my daughter and leave. Our peoples will continue to kill each other until one side is destroyed." His violet eyes bore into his. "Or you can let me see the truth and prove that humans are more than the monsters we believe you to be." Thought about it. He thought about his memories, both good and bad. He thought about the things he had done in the war and the people he had killed. He thought about his mother dying in that small room because they couldn't afford medicine. He thought about crying in the dark because she believed her mother had abandoned her. "Do it," he said. "I have nothing to hide." The matriarch placed her hands on either side of his head. Her touch was cool and strange, and felt something reaching into his mind, something vast and ancient and powerful. The ritual was not gentle. Walked through his memories like someone walking through a house. She saw his childhood, hungry and poor but full of love. She saw his mother reading him stories at night, teaching him to be kind even when the world was cruel. She saw him joining the military, not for glory but because he wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. She saw the war, the blood and the fire and the terrible choices. She saw him killing soldiers and crying afterward, alone in his quarters, sick with grief at what he had become. And she saw the rescue. She saw cutting free from the wreckage. She saw him give his own oxygen to keep her alive. She saw him carrying her through the dying ship, lungs burning, vision fading, refusing to let go. She felt what he felt in that moment. Not hatred, not greed, not calculation. Just a desperate need to save a life that was worth saving. The matriarch pulled out of his mind and gasped and fell to his knees. His head was pounding. His body was shaking. He felt like he had been turned inside out. But when he looked up, he saw something incredible. The supreme matriarch was staring at him, with an expression he had never seen on a face before. Wonder, amazement, and something that might have been fear. "This is not possible," she whispered. "Your soul, it burns so bright, brighter than any I have ever known." She was silent for a long moment. The whole room held its breath. Then she spoke a single phrase, and the delegation reacted with visible shock. One of them actually cried out and had to be steadied by another. The matriarch said. The translator on his belt struggled with the word. It offered several meanings at once: soul bond, life debt, eternal claim. "I don't understand," said. "What does that mean?" His face had gone pale. "Mother, you can't. He's human. The court will never accept it." "The court will accept what I tell them to accept." Reached down and pulled to his feet. She was so close that he could feel the strange heat radiating from her silver skin. "By the laws of my people, by bonds older than our empire, I claim you, Cole. You belong to me now, to my household, to my protection, to my side." She leaned in, and her next words were spoken only for him. "I have lived for 2 centuries, human. I have seen wonders and horrors beyond your imagination, and I have never met a soul like yours." Her violet eyes were intense and strange and somehow hungry. I do not know what you are, but I intend to find out, and I will not let you go until I do. Looked into the eyes of the most powerful being in the enemy empire, and realized that his life had just changed forever. He was not sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. But he was definitely going to find out. 6 months had passed since Cole became the property of an alien empress, and he still was not sure if he was a prisoner or a guest. The capital world was called, and it was beautiful in a way that hurt his human eyes. The cities were made of living crystal that sang when the wind blew through them. The sky was pale purple, and the 3 moons rose together every night like old friends meeting for dinner. The ocean was the color of wine, and strange creatures swam in its depths, singing songs that no human had ever heard. Hated it and he loved it, and he was absolutely terrified. The bond was not what he had expected. He was not a slave. He was not even a servant. His position in the matriarch's household was strange and hard to define. The closest human word was consort, but that was not quite right either. He had his own quarters in the palace, larger than any home he had ever lived in on Earth. He had servants who brought him food and clean clothes. He had access to the palace library, which contained more knowledge than he could read in 1,000 lifetimes. And he had the matriarch's protection, which he needed desperately, because the court wanted him dead. The first assassination attempt came in his second week on. A servant brought him tea that smelled slightly wrong and poured it out rather than drink it. The next day, that servant was found dead in her quarters. The matriarch had discovered the plot and dealt with it personally. The second attempt came a month later. A young noble challenged to a duel over some imagined insult. In culture, refusing a duel was a deadly shame, but before could respond, appeared and declared that anyone who harmed her would face her directly. The young noble his challenge and left the capital that night. The third attempt was more direct. Woke up in the middle of the night to find a figure standing over his bed with a knife. He rolled away just in time, and the blade cut the pillow where his head had been. The assassin was faster than him, stronger than him, trained in ways of killing that could not even imagine, but was a survivor. He had grown up poor on Earth. He had fought in the war. He had dragged a dying princess through a collapsing ship with no oxygen in his lungs. He was very, very hard to kill. The fight was ugly and brutal and silent. Used every dirty trick he knew, every desperate move that the military had taught him. He broke a lamp over the assassin's head. He threw furniture. He bit and clawed and refused to die. In the end, he was on the floor with the assassin's hands around his throat, his vision going dark, when the door exploded inward. The matriarch stood in the doorway, and she was terrible in her anger. Her silver skin glowed with inner fire. Her violet eyes burned like stars about to explode. She moved faster than anything had ever seen, crossing the room in a blur, and the assassin simply came apart in her hands. The violence was over in seconds. Lay on the floor, gasping for breath, surrounded by pieces of the person who had tried to kill him. Knelt beside him, and her burning anger transformed into something else. Fear. She was afraid, afraid that she had been too late. "You are hurt," she said, touching the bruises on his throat with gentle fingers. "I'm alive," croaked. "That's what matters." "This cannot continue." Her voice was shaking. "I have killed a dozen plotters already. There are always more. My court is a nest of serpents, and they will not stop until you are dead." "Then maybe I should leave. Go back to human space. It would be safer for everyone." "No," the word came out sharp and fast, almost desperate. "The cannot be broken. If you leave, the bond breaks and I—" She stopped. Something vulnerable crossed her ancient face. "I do not want you to leave." Looked up at this impossible creature, this empress who had ruled for 200 years, who had commanded fleets and destroyed worlds, who was feared by billions of beings across the galaxy. And he saw something in her eyes that he recognized. Loneliness. The deep, aching loneliness of someone who had never been allowed to be weak, to be soft, to be anything other than perfect. "Okay," he said, "I'll stay, but you have to help me. Teach me how to survive here. Teach me how to be more than just a target." For the first time since he had met her, the matriarch smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed her face into something almost warm. "I think I can do that," she said. The months that followed were hard. Taught the ways of the court, the hidden rules and secret alliances, the thousand small gestures that meant life or death. Helped, too, translating the things her mother could not explain, filling in the gaps between their two cultures. The three of them became a strange little family. Dinner together every night, walks in the crystal gardens, long conversations about history and philosophy and the meaning of life, blossomed under the attention, becoming bold and confident in ways she had never been before. And something changed between and. She started seeking him out at odd hours, appearing in his quarters with questions about human culture, about Earth, about his life before the war. She listened to his stories with a hunger that surprised him. She laughed at his jokes, and her laugh was deep and real, and nothing like the cold mask she wore in public. He started seeing the person beneath the matriarch, the woman who had been forced into power too young, who had spent 2 centuries surrounded by enemies, who had never been allowed to trust anyone. The war between humans and ended, not with a great battle or a dramatic surrender, but with quiet negotiations and tired diplomats who were sick of watching their people die. Played a small part in the peace talks, helping both sides understand each other, bridging the gap between two cultures that had never bothered to talk. When the treaty was signed, there was a celebration in the capital. The whole city lit up with music and light, and for one night they allowed themselves to be happy. Found himself on a balcony, looking up at the 3 moons, thinking about everything that had happened. A year ago, he had been a simple commander on a human frigate. Now he lived in an alien palace, bound to an alien empress, caught between 2 worlds. He heard footsteps behind him and knew, without looking, that it was. "You're not at the party," she said. "Neither are you." She came to stand beside him, and he noticed that she was not wearing her crown. Her silver hair hung loose around her shoulders. She looked younger somehow, less like an empress and more like a woman. "I am tired of parties," she said. "I have attended 10,000 parties in my life. They are always the same, people lying to each other with smiles on their faces." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." She turned to look at him, and something shifted in her violet eyes. "You are different, Cole. You do not lie. You do not flatter. You treat me like a person, not like a goddess or a monster." "You are a person," said. "A person who happens to be very tall and very old and very powerful, but still a person. My people do not see it that way." "Your people are wrong." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am 217 years old. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have loved and lost more than you can imagine, and I have never in all that time met anyone like you." Felt his heart beating faster. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? "I do not know." She stepped closer, and he could feel the warmth radiating from her silver skin. "But I want to find out. I want to know everything about you. I want to understand how a creature from a species so young and so small can burn so bright." She reached out and touched his face, her fingers cool and gentle. "What are you doing to me, human?" she whispered. "I have not felt this way in 100 years." Looked into her ancient, beautiful eyes, and said the only thing he could think of. "For a terrifying alien empress, you're pretty easy to talk to." The supreme matriarch of the Dominion, ruler of 1,000 worlds, conqueror of galaxies, did something she had not done in 200 years. She laughed. And somewhere in the stars, the universe shifted, just a little, to make room for something new. 5 years had changed everything. The galaxy that Cole had grown up in, The galaxy of war and hatred and fear was slowly becoming something else, something better, and he had watched it happen from the strangest seat in the universe, standing beside the woman he loved in a palace made of singing crystal on a world with purple skis and 3 moons. It still felt like a dream sometimes. The Dominion was not the same empire it had been. Human ambassadors walked freely through the capital now, their strange, soft skin and short bodies no longer cause for disgust. Trade ships moved between the two civilizations, carrying goods and ideas and music and stories. Young devoured human entertainment with a hunger that surprised everyone. They loved human movies and human food and especially human music, with its raw emotion and simple melodies. The old guard complained, of course. They muttered in their crystal towers about contamination and weakness and the decline of proper values. But the old guard was dying out, year by year, and the young did not care about ancient hatred. They cared about dancing. They cared about hot chocolate. They cared about a universe where and human could stand side by side and look at the stars together. And at the center of it all was Cole. He was no longer just the strange human who had saved a princess. He was the consort of the supreme matriarch, her official partner, her equal in all things that mattered. Their relationship had scandalized both civilizations at first. How could a being as ancient and powerful as bind herself to a creature who would live maybe 100 years? How could a human accept the embrace of an alien who had once been his greatest enemy? But time and love had answered those questions better than words ever could. Had changed. He had taught her to laugh again, to be silly, to enjoy small pleasures that her position had her for centuries. She smiled now, real smiles that reached her violet eyes. She told jokes, bad ones mostly, and seemed delighted when people groaned at them. She had learned to hug, a human gesture she had once found barbaric, and now she hugged, and so often that the palace servants gossiped about it in shocked whispers. And had changed. She had shown him wonders beyond anything he could have imagined. Worlds where the oceans were made of liquid light, creatures that sang in colors instead of sounds, the deep history of a civilization that had touched the stars when humans were still learning to make fire. She had made him bigger somehow, more than he had ever been. They were not the same as they had been. They were better together. Had grown up too. She was a woman now, tall and graceful, with her mother's silver skin and her father's. Well, was not her father by blood, but he was her father in every way that mattered. She had his stubbornness and his kindness and his tendency to say exactly what she was thinking, whether or not it was appropriate. She had also become the first ambassador to Earth. Watched her now on the, giving a speech to the United Human Assembly. She stood before thousands of delegates from every nation on his home world, and she was not afraid. Her violet eyes burned with confidence as she spoke. My name is, I am a princess of the Dominion, daughter of the supreme matriarch, and I am alive today because of a human. The assembly was silent. Every eye was fixed on her. 5 years ago, I was dying in the wreckage of a destroyed ship. I was the enemy. By every law of war, by every rule of survival, I should have been left to die. But a man named Cole did not care about those rules. He saw a child who needed help, and he helped. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. He gave me his own oxygen when mine ran out. He carried me through a collapsing ship with fire in his lungs and darkness in his eyes. He refused to let me die, even though saving me meant risking his own life. And when I asked him why, he said something I will never forget. She looked directly into the camera, as if she could see watching from across the stars. He said that family is not always blood. Sometimes it is the people who show up when no one else will. Tears were running down her silver cheeks now, but she did not look away. My people believed that humans were monsters, primitive creatures driven by greed and violence, unworthy of respect. We were wrong. Humans have something that we lack, something we are only now beginning to understand. You call it heart. You call it soul. You call it love. She spread her arms wide, embracing the whole assembly. Cole taught me that the smallest act of kindness can echo through eternity. He taught me that love is stronger than hate, that hope is stronger than fear, that one person choosing to be good can change the entire galaxy. I am here today, standing before you, because one human refused to be a monster. She smiled, and it was Smile, the one she had learned from him in those long nights on the Defiant. My people live for centuries. We measure time in ways you cannot imagine. But you have taught us something we never knew. You have taught us that it is not how long you live that matters. It is how brightly you burn. The assembly erupted in applause and turned off the... He was crying, and he did not care who saw. Found him in the garden an hour later. The suns were setting, painting the alien sky in colors that humans had never named. Purple and gold and a strange, luminous green that made the crystal flowers glow like tiny stars. It was beautiful, the most beautiful thing had ever seen, and after 5 years it still took his breath away. Sat beside him on the stone bench. She was wearing a simple dress instead of her royal robes, and her silver hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked young. She looked happy. I watched her speech, she said. Our daughter did well. Our daughter smiled at the words. I never thought I would be a father. You are a good one, better than you know. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. It was still strange to him sometimes how small he felt next to her. She was so much bigger, so much older, so much more powerful than he would ever be. But she made herself small for him. She bent down so they could walk side by side. She held his hand gently as if he was something precious. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking about the future, about what happens next. What do you mean? Looked at the sunset, at the 3 moons rising in the darkening sky. I'm human. I have maybe 50 or 60 years left if I'm lucky. You'll live for centuries after I'm gone. What happens then? Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft and serious. I have thought about this many times. My advisors have urged me to prepare for your death, to plan for a future without you. She turned to look at him, and her violet eyes were bright with something fierce. I have told them to be silent. I do not wish to think about a future without you. It is too painful. No, let me speak. She took his hands in hers. My people measure time in centuries. We think in terms of empires and ages and the long arc of history. But you have given me something my people never could. What's that? A reason to care about today. A reason to look forward to tomorrow. She pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of deep intimacy. I do not know what will happen when you are gone. I do not know if I will survive it. But I know that these years with you have been worth more than the 2 centuries before them. You have made me feel alive in ways I had forgotten were possible. Felt tears running down his face again. He seemed to cry a lot these days. Said it was one of the things she loved most about him, his willingness to feel things openly. I love you, he said. I know that's a strange thing to say to an alien empress who could destroy planets with a word, but I love you more than I have ever loved anything in my life. I love you too, my strange little human. She kissed him, and it was gentle and warm and full of promise. Now stop crying, or the servants will think I have upset you, and I will never hear the end of it. Laughed, and she laughed with him, and the sound echoed through the crystal gardens like music. They sat together as the suns finished setting and the moons rose high and the stars came out one by one. Somewhere out in the galaxy was changing hearts and minds. Somewhere, human and ships were trading and talking and learning from each other. Somewhere, children were growing up in a universe where peace was possible, where love could cross the vast distances between species. And it had all started with one man who refused to let hatred make his choices for him. Said, looking up at the stars, "Yes. Do you think this is what the future looks like? Humans and together, building something new." The supreme matriarch, ancient and powerful and beautiful, smiled at her human consort with all the warmth she had learned to feel. "I think the future is whatever we make it," she said, "and I think we are making something wonderful." They stayed in the garden until the stars filled the sky, two people from different worlds who had found each other against all odds. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the galaxy was learning what humans had always known: that the smallest acts of kindness could echo through eternity. That love, stubborn and irrational and beautifully human, could conquer even the cold indifference of the universe. And that forever was not about how long you lived. It was about how brightly you burned, and who you chose to burn beside. Cole, once a simple commander from a poor colony on Earth, held his alien empress close and watched the stars wheel overhead. He had never been so happy in his life. And this, he thought, was only the beginning.